All right.
It's great to have on the health and wellness interview today my good mate, Mr. Sean Barnes. How you doing, Sean?
I'm great, Chris. Been beaming into a home office near you. I love it. We've
Great to
seen
see
lots
you,
of
Sean.
people's home offices, haven't we, recently?
Seems to be the trend.
Someone, one of my work colleagues, had the husband walking out in the dressing gown into the Zoom call only last week, fortunately. So, that happens to everyone. So, yeah.
Air drying on camera.
Yes, exactly.
Oh dear.
Not recommended. So, all good.
So just for viewers, Sean and I go back, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14 years now from the
Yeah.
dusty and murky world of engineering where we first connected.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're here today just to talk about health and wellness, Sean, amid the sort of COVID crisis that's enveloping the world. And before we hit record, we were talking about opportunistic and, seeing the great things that come out of COVID in sense of health and wellness. And I know you being fully into your sport and your running over the years and your crazy ultra marathons. What's your take on, this thing called wellness, Sean, that's out there? It seems to be banded around. What's your personal take on wellness today?
I think I don't think it's changed anything in the last couple of months at all. And in fact, it's probably doubled down on how important it is for me. But for me, I've started to really look at. There's a great Maori model, Te Whare Tapu Whā, which talks about physical well-being, mental well-being, spirituality and family as the four pillars. And if you look at it all, they're all components that we all need to have, and you need some of them more at other times than others. But I think it's, if you look at any of these frameworks that are out there, they all have the same components, and you actually need all of them. And if you're missing some of them, that's when the issues start to happen. And if you're missing lots of them, that's when it starts to become a bit of a negative spiral, I suppose, of all of this stuff. So I've always and like we've talked about before, I think learning from experience as well, the physical movement part's always been important to me. Mainly, I think it was an energy expenditure thing probably when I was younger and being active and enjoying that feeling. But as I've gone on, I've realized there's a mental component to that that's more important to me now than probably anything. And it's that, like that being out by yourself, thinking, defragging, having some space. And so you start to see the interconnectedness of all of this stuff. And I think that's really important. When we have challenging times like we've had, that's when it gets put to the test, or when other things happen in your life. And I can look back and think of those moments where, those things are challenged. But I've always taken a view of, I like evolving in those things as well. Like I'm not, you mentioned running. Yeah, I've run all my life, but it means different things to me at different times. And I remember there was a real kind of epiphany from a sports perspective where I realized that sport can't just be about competing. And it wasn't like I wasn't an elite athlete or anything like that. It wasn't for first place, but for me, it was always trying to be better. But then you get to a point in your life where you realize that's just not reality, and you can't keep doing that. Like you don't, having done Ironman before, as I've talked to you about, the thought of doing that now with my life the way it is and what I would have to give up to do that just doesn't even register on my radar, or I would do it completely differently to the way I did 20 years ago, So I think that's the other thing is about all of this is it's an evolution, isn't it? And I'm always looking for new things to kind of go back to or add in or try or play around with that. So yeah, it's never static. That's the thing I've found.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've enjoyed that. Yeah.
Evolution and change. And one of the other interviewees recently said, like, exercise, she's big into running as well. Personal trainer, health coach, Manuela, she's on the YouTube channel here as well. And she said, like, actually, it's just a toolbox for the mind.
Yeah, totally.
So exercise is just accessing the mind, which might seem counterintuitive to those who don't have a lifestyle of exercise. And
it's also connection.
Yeah.
I think of sports a way that I spend time with people who are really important to me as well. Who, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't see them. So that's our time together as well. So yeah, I think there is an interrelatedness of all of this, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear a fitness person talk about that for sure. Yeah,
Interesting. I'm visualizing like an organ, the 4 pillars of wellness, like social,
yeah.
spiritual, interconnectedness. And what do you think have you learned about your personal wellness sort of organ, if you like, over the decade?
Yeah. Well, the motto I talked to Te Whare Tapu Whā is actually a house, and these are the 4 pillars of the house, and it's on whenua, which is the land. And you think of it from a conceptual perspective, you take a pillar out, the house will fall down. It's not so I think like I was saying, the interrelatedness of it is really, really important. And also, you realize that different bits, like one thing that I've added as a habit, I can't even remember how long ago now, but I started doing meditation out of interest, not out of, oh geez, it's what all the cool kids are doing, which can be portrayed a little bit in that way. But I've found that to be one of the most incredible tools. And I do it for 10 minutes a day. That's it, nothing more. It's part of my routine in the morning when I wake up. First thing I do is sit for 10 minutes. And you start to learn that some days your brain's going full noise, some days it's not. You have different experiences. And when you listen to people who know about meditation and what it's all about, that's part of it, and now if I do without that tool, I know that there's things that happen during my days as a consequence of that, and the state that I can get into. And that's taken me a number of years to build that habit. But I think there's always something to learn, and you just got to try it. It's like, be open to it. And but you need it as a toolkit. Like I totally see it as a toolkit. And I remember we were talking about a couple of years ago, I had my first ever running injury, which meant I couldn't run. I literally couldn't run for probably 9 to 12 months. And that was like someone ripping like trying to build a house without the hammer. And then I was like, what? And you're reaching for the hammer and you're like, oh, I can't find what do I do now? And I remember a very conscious moment where I've got to find another tool to put in there, because it's just left a big hole in what I normally do. So so I think there's a lot you can. It's a good analogy, actually, to be honest.
One of the other interviews was Neve Ross Wallace on the series here, and she's a professional a meditation teacher. And actually online I did a 10-minute meditation online.
Oh, nice.
I was like blown away. I was like, what? Why don't I do this every day, Chris?
Well, it's crazy. It's a really simple thing. And what I like and really useful thing is just, be mindful about being realistic as well. Like you don't need to, it's like running, the number one failing with people running is that they go out the door and try and run for 25 minutes in their first run. And generally after a week, they've injured themselves, and then they realize that they hate running because they're injured, but it's not actually that way. And if you access things in a realistic way, a really great book I've read, which I was dying to talk to you about as well, is called Atomic Habits. And I can highly recommend that philosophy, because it's like, don't try and do 25 minutes, do one. Whatever it is, just make it accessible. And then you get to know whether it works for you or not. But generally, you'll find most things work. That's the thing. You just got to go in at the right point.
So I think we've got a mutual mate in Jed Robinson.
Yes. Well, I've met Jed a couple of times. Yeah.
So Jed just told the same story as you, basically. You want to get into training, you follow Gusto Motivation, 3 weeks, then it gets a bit tough. And, maybe 7 out of 10 people just cave in and do nothing. And it's overcoming that initial flurry of Gusto Motivation to take small steps.
Absolutely.
Just keep going.
And the physical's the great example of that, isn't it? So so.
Let me ask you, Sean, about your career in sense of wellness and meaning, because you would practice as an engineer, and that's how it connected with you. You did your PhD in wastewater engineering some years ago now, and now you've transformed your career, haven't you, into social enterprise, and you're thoroughly engaged and passionate now, just in the wellness theme of your psychological wellness and your sense of having purposeful and meaningful work. Can you explain to viewers here that sort of transition from being an engineer and being a manager with a consulting firm and sort of corporate sector, and now in a completely different space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And when I look at what I'm doing and my goals, and I do a bit of a process which has taken years to evolve and continues to evolve, but I see where I put work in my life as contribution. And there's all this talk about work-life balance and all that, but that I think it's a really dangerous, just on that work-life balance thing. It's a very dangerous thing to say, I will accept things that might run counter to me, or because it's work, and balance it with life. I think it's a really dangerous mindset to have, because it's kind of it's a compromise, if you know what I mean. And so I look at work as contribution, and I look at work as the opportunity where I can give back to others, and fortunate to have a role where I can do that. I've got a role where I can influence others and influence the things that I really care about, and help drive things in that direction. There's a development piece to it around people, where I can work with people and help them, be colleagues and things like that. I'm learning, so I look at those things, and it's like, well, from my well-being perspective, I know I love learning, and I like being in situations where I'm having to learn new skills, or being challenged in my thinking. So that happens at work, and it happens at home, and that's where this stuff kind of, there's a balance that you need to strike between all these things. Because if work means that you can't, if movement's important to you, being with family, social connection, all those things we need, if work stops all that stuff happening, you've got a real fundamental problem with well-being, haven't you? So work is just another environment where this stuff should be manifesting, and if it's not, then you're not going to get to the gym at lunch. You're just going to, it's just, oh no, I'm at work now. That's the stuff I do over there. I don't, so I think I know I'm in a really privileged position to be able to make those choices, but to some degree, I think we all can and influence that. Yeah. So I kind of believe that.
Do you think in your prior career that the sense of profiteering and the sense of working for organizations or pursuing profit, was that in a sense sort of counter to your true values of service and community?
I think there were aspects of that. Yeah, I think there were. But again, it's kind of that balancing, isn't it? It's like I often wonder, what would have happened if I cut my hours back a few years ago? Like what would have been the influence of that, and in potentially similar outcome. Like I think I absolutely agree. There's an environment thing, there's a culture thing, there's all those things at work. And I'm not saying there's this utopia where everything's perfect. Like not every workplace, there's no such thing. Even probably working for yourself, there's those moments of challenge. Let's be honest. But yeah, I think there's you do make decisions around what environment you're in and all that kind of stuff, which is healthy, but it doesn't mean it's not attainable. It's like sometimes you have to work in that space.
Cool.
So yeah.
Just looking at mental health in NZ, Sean, and obviously the statistics aren't great for us as a nation, and with COVID, probably not what we need at all. How would you frame, say if you had Jacinda on the call here for a minute, it's a health and wellness, an approach to wellness and the Māori model you explained, and the future of NZ and our mental health and our children, and what we're not doing and what we're chasing, and the values at play? I know this is a big global question. What would you think are one or two ideas to look at the health and wellness space of our nation?
I think there's a few really interesting things. Like we talked about work, and I feel like we have an expectation, and this time's been really fascinating from that perspective, where work is where you go to earn money. And yes, that's true. But what if you framed it as people had the financial, I think we've got big challenges with a large group of portion of our population who have no choice but to work 2 or 3 jobs. And I think that's one of the most perverse situations you can look at as a nation and go, how can we have working poor? Like what's fundamentally broken there? That's just insane. And then you look at the inequality statistics and things like that. And I know exactly where I sit on that curve, and it feels abhorrent for me to sit here and kind of say that, but I'm well aware there is a massive chunk of our population who, through this time not being able to work, has really, that has just damaged their whole life. It's a horrible thing to think about, that we're so dependent on that money to have that freedom and that financial freedom. But there's a lot of people who don't have choice. So how can you create financial freedom? Because that's a part of this. You can't have well-being if you don't have headspace. And there's some really great books written around the poverty trap, and it's a mental trap a lot of the time. It's the fact that like if you're stuck in that, where's the next dollar coming from, and if I don't get it, then everything falls down around me. That's a horrible position to be in. And there's some really great, really radical, well, it seems radical thinking, but in lots of ways, things like universal basic income. Like what if we, and in essence, we've actually piloted that over the last few weeks. It's like you don't have to go to work and you get paid. The wage subsidy is a universal basic income, where we said it wasn't, you maybe not 100% universal, but what if we all got a portion of money every week to do it with no questions asked? What would that do for the country? So it's fascinating when you think about it.
The question here is, Sean, around social enterprise, and I guess part A would be, could you give a 20-second potted definition of what that is if somebody's viewing this and they haven't a clue what social enterprise
is? Yeah.
So that's sort of part A. Part B would be if you expanded the reach of social enterprise in NZ across the world, and the influence on well-being in communities, in less chasing financials for narrow band of shareholders. Do you think that would have a significant influence and effect on
Well, we think it's fascinating time. So social enterprises trade for a purpose. They're trading organizations, and their purpose is a social, environmental, cultural one, even economic to some degree, around participation in the economy. And they sell products and services like every other business does, but they exist for their purpose. That's pretty much. So if you think of corporate social responsibility, and it's a corporate handing a little bit of money out to a charity each year, what if that was the whole purpose of the corporate, was to maximize the amount of money going to that charity? It's just an extreme of a spectrum of organizations. So, and interestingly, we see that this is the time for that kind of thinking, because if you don't have decent work, if you don't have places where people who have been marginalized out of the workforce, whether it's disability, they've been inside, their social circumstance, if they can't access any form of work, they're never going to get back into the workforce, either from a perception prejudice perspective or a confidence ability perspective. And that's what a lot of social enterprises do. So they are those places where they provide meaningful work and are trying to bridge people back into mainstream employment. And a lot of them work in the mental health and wellbeing space as well. So there are, I think there's some really interesting, like business isn't broken. I don't subscribe to that we should get rid of business, because there's lots of attributes of the business. But if you can do a business in a way that is good for its people, that's really what we're trying to do here. So that's what, you mentioned the consulting model. If a consultancy, is just about thrashing people and trying to get 70 hours of work out of them a week, paying them 40, dog eat dog, dump on your colleague to get the partnership. If that's what business is, that's not healthy. But if consulting is, you can come in, have the flexibility to work on projects, spend some time at home with the kids, whatever, that's a good model. So I think there's elements of business that can be done, rethought. And I always think of the organizations that we work a lot with in terms of social enterprises. They're organizations that quite often show people that you can do things that everyone will say can't be done. So, I can't employ people who've had a criminal conviction. Well, I can point at organizations who 95% of their employees are people who've had criminal convictions, and they can run a viable business. They do it differently, sure. They don't make as much money as you possibly could in another model. But you can do it, and the benefits are amazing. And if you monetize those benefits, they're actually probably more profitable for us as a collective than they are, just pushing them to the side and hoping the government deals with the problem. So yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's a huge part of it. Yeah, but it comes back to that, what's a good workplace from a wellbeing perspective, I reckon. So
I guess it's quite sort of political in a way, in the sense of you've got raw capitalism on one side and sort of communism on the other, and the social enterprise is a different. Sometimes maybe it's a struggle for business owners to get their head around the whole model, the value chain model of behind social enterprise.
Well, yes and no. But if you said, do you want employees who are really keen to be at work? Do you want to contribute to your community you operate in? Do you want to not operate in a bubble? Do you want to be seen to be doing the right thing and have a good brand and perception? Then a business owner would say yes, 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 yes. And you go, okay, how do you do that? That's the challenge, and that's what's really interesting about this is there are ways of doing it, and it's not that hard. And there's role models out there who can show you. And
so just back to the lockdown, Sean, what was your biggest high and biggest low through your lockdown experience there with your wife and your daughter Mackenzie there?
Yeah, I think I was thinking of the things I really loved. I love the simplicity and the solitude. There's moments where I talked about my kind of well-being and my toolkit. I didn't go away from my toolkit. I'm feeling fit and healthy and exercised and had time to myself and did all that kind of stuff, which is great. But I loved there was this element of solitude, that I really enjoyed. Like you talk about sitting down to meditate for 10 minutes and finding a quiet place. You could actually walk for an hour and a half and have a quiet place. And it was just kind of bizarre. And I don't think we'd ever get that again. It was, and you walk out your door and it's there. So that was, I love that. The challenge is, I think the human connection thing is fascinating. And yes, we've got media like this where we can connect and you can do it a lot, but it's not natural. And in the last week, actually going and having a face-to-face meeting with a friend or seeing someone you hadn't seen for a while, there's a little, you realize the little thing that's been missing, and it's not that I don't love hanging out with my family, that's great, but there are, you have social interactions and connections that are also important outside of your immediate family, that are really, they're critical things too. And when they're taken away, when you put them back in, it's like, oh, I think, what I found really interesting is there were moments where it wasn't, it's hard to know whether you're dealing with it well or not. It's because you haven't got your frames of reference. There's days where you're like, oh geez, and you check in with it, like, or you go, wow, I'm actually not having a great day today, but you're in the same environment with the same people. Effectively, some days it felt like Groundhog Day, where it's like, oh, here we go again, same desk on the same screen, talking to the same people in the same way. There was the real mundane routine of it made it very hard to kind of check in and say, well, am I good, or am I right? Am I having one of those days? Or and then you're like, oh, actually, maybe I was having one of those days. It's like, oh, okay. So it's just hard to know. You're kind of missing a lot of cues, eh? Yeah. Like if you walked into the office and you look like a moody bastard, then someone would go, oh, what's up with you today? If you walk into your home desk and you've lost that, haven't you? So
it's interesting to go back to meditation. Of course, the Zens will say accept your bad frame of mind and wave it on, and it's just you notice that you're in a bad frame of mind temporarily.
That's exactly right. It's hard to notice actually a lot of the time. Until your wife says go out for a walk or something like that. You might want to think about going out for a walk. Okay, yes. I see what you mean.
I'm ever the optimist about silver lining, Sean, from this, and opportunities come out to better life and better opportunity for all as a nation and as a society. What are one or two areas where you would hope that we're learning as a nation and maybe across the world from COVID? Maybe around authentic connections and time with family, even what Jacinda might talk about, in the sort of annals of of power that, how can we learn from this experience
Yeah.
to get to sort of launch ourselves into the future?
I think, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't there? There's connection, shelter, food, all that kind of stuff. We just lived that experience, and health, one of those things. And I like to think that maybe we've got a time where we can reflect. And I know in Christchurch, we've had multiple reflection points over the last few years, which is maybe why in some respects, a lot of people are just like, oh, here we go again a little bit, which has its benefits and disbenefits. But on the whole, as we were talking about earlier, this has been a very human crisis. And it's also, made you realize what's important, what's not important. It's kind of weird to spend money again. I wouldn't call myself a rampant consumer or I didn't get a lot of love out of spending money, but when you stop and you had that moment and then you go, oh, actually, what's the point of this? Like you start thinking about what's the point of this, and maybe we've stripped that back, but also that sense of community, and we're all, like we kind of we're all in this together. And I hope that, we realize there are lots of vulnerable people who have health conditions who, in the last 8 weeks, has probably been a living nightmare for them. That we start to respect each other and where we're at, and that we've all had different experiences, and even the last 8 weeks, everyone's had markedly different experiences. So I'd just like to think that we can hold on to that and respect, and find out where people are at and, what situation they're in, and don't just assume or judge or, there's something quite kind of stripping it back. that's probably what's happened, isn't it? We've all kind of been through something like that. And so hopefully we can hold on to that. And then because of that, what do we value? Like what is important to us? I think that's really important. Where it's like, I'm really keen to go away because I want to see a different place and be with my friends. It's not just a holiday. It's like I don't just need holidays or need to, there's a different layer of thinking in everything at the moment. And it's before we just drop back into mindlessly doing a whole lot of stuff. It's a really interesting time, isn't it? Why do I need to go away? Like just stop a moment and go, why am I buying that? Or why do I feel like I need to go there? Or why do I need to be in a cafe and seeing my friends? Like, what is it? What's important? It's, if you haven't worked that out, it's good to think about it, isn't it? So,
I was on my bike this morning going down the road, taking my kids to school on the chariot, being a good, healthy boy with two children in a chariot behind me. And I kind of saw a whole bunch of school children sort of gawping into their devices. And wow, maybe the genie's out of the lamp now with tech and that sort of sense of connection. But I feel pushing 50 next month, that emerging sense of social disconnection through device habits. And I've got a 15-year-old. She's just growing up with smartphones. I guess it's a narrow edge between
very tricky
normal connection, then human connection, and then actual some falsified digital black hole of connection.
This is an interesting medium. I think you've got to be mindful about how you're using it and what you don't get. And you watch, I think it's quite funny watching all the Zoom experts, like in the bolt of blue that this thing's been and all that kind of stuff. But you wouldn't want to sit on here and have I've heard of some of our councils running their 5-hour council meetings on Zoom. You tell me what that's like for people. It's like people are participating in it going, what are we doing? Like, what's fundamentally, it's not a real medium, is it? It's great. And, like I think we had weekly calls with our friends that we wouldn't see every week. That's really great. There's something about that I'd like to continue, but it's not face to face, is it? It's like we are hanging out to see each other face to face, but that balance, it's like living on a screen is not a very healthy environment. So
Sean, what do you think? What's your health and wellness picture for the next, I don't know, year or two for your family, for your career? What are you looking at in that sort of space to inspire us with?
I think, like for me, it's not that inspiring, but I've built some good habits and routines, and for me, I came into this year not really with goals, but more with trying to work out my processes or whatever, like what's my morning routine. It works, commit to it, tweak a couple of things to keep it interesting. But I don't think there's fundamentally a lot of stuff that I would throw out. I've got into good rhythm of things, and I think that's great. Like, it's nice to be able to feel like that. There's a lot of stuff that I just do day to day. So and I think that's, go back to that kind of atomic habits thing. It's, that's the stuff that really matters. That's the stuff that I love the principle of how can you add something massive, like I see guitar behind you. Like if you didn't play the guitar, how could you add guitar into your life if you don't have any room to add guitar? So people come up with these false things. So I keep thinking of what's a good, if you can get to the point where you've got a little bit of space 2 or 3 evenings a week and you choose to play the guitar, great. But don't just throw it in on top of a life where you haven't got that space. It's in headspace. So I think, and just keeping working on my mindfulness, it's like, that's a really, I can't underestimate how powerful that is. It's like just being able to call yourself out in the moment or in the middle of something. And I battle with the device thing as well. It's a very interesting. I've actually, someone suggested, I've got written on my home screen on my device, what am I doing in your hand? So every time I pick up my phone, it tells me to stop and go, why am I here? Like, what am I here to do? And it might be to send a message, and it might be to read something and all that. But if you go in mindful, then you don't just get lost down 4 hours later or whatever. It's not that bad.
But fiction. It's that data head. It's the instances. It's the check. It's the love me. It's has she responded, and it's. I was thinking, this is off script, but the sort of whether Mark Zuckerberg knew what he was creating in 2004, 5, 6. With this, in sense of social impact, not just selling stuff, but actually influencing behavior, him and Jobs. And what's happened is you like nothing else perhaps in the modern world. Like you look at CDs or innovations in the jet engine, you look at this thing in your hand and it's changing how people form relationships. And it's killing relationships. And
Totally.
It has some pluses as well, of course.
But it's like feeding. Well, it's like feeding a whole bunch of crackhead. It's cocaine, isn't it? It's like, because it just turns on a whole lot of ingrained human behavior, which is not always the best behavior. Just
a quick one before we finish up. Your mindfulness meditation, Sean, and your sports performance. I interviewed Steve Gurney a few weeks ago in the series, and Steve was very open and self-effacing about his journey. Did you find meditation did you frame or shift your sense of attitude to your sports and your running at all?
It has helped. It was probably the other way around. Like I came to a realization with my sport, but then I've subsequently realized how powerful that is as well. Totally. It's like, and it might be a bit of age and experience as well, but the wisdom thing coming in. But if you can, there's so much, I've done some marathon running in the last couple of years, and my mindset's been completely different because of the other tools that I've had. And it has been, partly that. It's like when you're in a moment and you're pushing hard and your mind says, or your body's saying stop, and your mind goes, cool, you should listen to your body. That's just your mind speaking. It's not, it's not, it's not your body saying, like, there's a lot of evidence that says, and you've been through that in a marathon as well, haven't you? Like your body can go for a lot longer than the marathon. There's no doubt whatsoever. It's your mind just getting kind of lazy and stepping in and saying, oh yeah, right, let's call time on this. And if you're not aware of that, you'll just go, okay, cool. And I look back at some of my past kind of events and stuff, and I totally bought, I just listened to the genie on my shoulder. It is really quite powerful, and visualization and thinking about those moments is really cool. It's quite scary.
With my one and only marathon, I found the last 41 kilometers were a complete nightmare.
That's right. That's so true. After the K of Glory, at the start. At least you weren't doing an ultra. There's people who have that experience where the last 99 are horrible. So
All right, hey, awesome talk today. If the viewers are saying, "Who's this guy, Sean? How can I connect with Sean Barnes?" How do they find you, Sean?
Oh, well, this is the thing. I'm not social. I'm not on social media, but I work at an organization called Akina, Akina. I am on LinkedIn, and I love putting stuff up there. So follow Chris through to me or whatever. But yeah, that's probably about me. Yeah, I'm around in Christchurch. People know me, so I'm not a celebrity, but yeah, I just don't. Yeah, I don't have any social handles. There may be scraps, but don't bother.
Who's that guy running down the street? Yep.
Oh, it might be me. Who knows?
Going faster than most.
Yeah, I'm trying to, but it's all good. Excellent.
Great to talk to you, my friend.
Hey, you too. Nice to talk, and we'll catch up soon.
Catch up real soon, Sean.
Excellent.
Okay, bye for now.